The obsidian blade sliced through the air with terrible precision. A moment of resistance as it met flesh. Then the sickening sound of severance as the ceremonial weapon completed its arc. Purple blood sprayed across the black stone floor, forming intricate patterns that would soon join the countless others that had soaked into the ancient chamber over centuries. Empress Ferrara stood motionless, her wolf-like features betraying no emotion as she watched the life drain from her 47th husband. His body convulsed once, twice, then lay still, eyes frozen in an expression of both terror and relief. The silence in the ritual chamber was absolute. "Another failure," she said, her voice echoing against the obsidian walls. "Clean this up. Prepare for the next ritual." Vex, her chief telepathic officer, bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, this marks the 47th consecutive unsuccessful bonding. Perhaps we should consider—" "I did not ask for your opinion," Ferrara interrupted, her golden eyes flashing dangerously. "The Arhena Empire requires a successful bond. Our dynasty will not end with me. Find another candidate." The Empress turned away, her elaborate robes of midnight blue swirling around her tall frame. The light from the bioluminescent symbols etched into the chamber walls reflected off her silver-gray fur, creating an ethereal aura that reminded all present of her divine right to rule. She paused at the doorway, not bothering to look back at the corpse of her latest attempt at securing the Empire's future. "And Vex," she added coldly. "Find something different this time. Our traditional methods are proving inadequate." The ancient doors sealed behind her with a resonant thud that seemed to punctuate the finality of her command. Left alone with the remains and a team of silent attendants, Vex sighed heavily. 47 potential consorts, 47 failed bonding rituals, 47 executions. The pattern had become distressingly predictable. Each candidate, chosen from the Empire's most mentally disciplined nobles, had failed to withstand the Empress's telepathic probe during the bonding ceremony. When their minds collapsed under her overwhelming psychic presence, tradition demanded their elimination. A failed bond was considered both a personal affront and a threat to imperial stability. But with each failure, Ferrara grew weaker. The rituals drained her life force, and the Empire whispered that the ancient bloodline was reaching its end. "Something different," she had said. Vex's wrinkled brow furrowed deeper as an unconventional possibility formed in his mind. "Commander Rain," he called to the military officer, waiting discreetly in the shadows. "That human prisoner captured in the recent border skirmish, is he still alive?" The commander's expression shifted from stoic to surprised. "The soldier? Yes. He's proven remarkably resilient during interrogation." "Bring him to me," Vex ordered, "and tell no one." 3 days later, Lucas was dragged from his cell, still disoriented from sleep. The human had lost track of time in the perpetual twilight of Arhena detention, but he estimated it had been several weeks since his capture during what should have been a routine reconnaissance mission. As a former Special Forces operative, he had been prepared for interrogation, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of alien imprisonment. "Where are you taking me?" he asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. The guards, tall, wolf-like beings with silver-gray fur and cold golden eyes, did not respond. Their grip on his arms was firm, but not cruel, as they led him through corridors of increasing opulence. The architecture around him gradually transformed from utilitarian prison design to elaborate, palace-like structures. Ceilings rose higher, walls gleamed with polished obsidian and precious metals, and intricate bioluminescent patterns provided haunting blue illumination. Lucas noted everything with a soldier's attention to detail, cataloging potential escape routes, even as he marveled at the alien splendor. They stopped before a massive door engraved with symbols he couldn't decipher. One guard placed his palm against a panel, and the doors silently parted. "Enter human," commanded a voice from within. Lucas was pushed forward into a chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The room was circular, its walls and floor made of polished black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Glowing blue symbols formed concentric circles on the floor, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded him disconcertingly of a heartbeat. At the center stood a raised dais with what appeared to be an altar, a slab of the same black stone, but with channels carved into its surface that led to a basin filled with luminescent blue liquid. Near this altar stood two figures. One he recognized as an older member of the alien species, dressed in elaborate robes with numerous metallic ornaments that clinked softly as he moved. The other. "So this is the human warrior," said Empress Ferrara, turning to face him fully. Lucas had seen members of her species before, but none like her. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her powerful frame draped in robes of deep blue that contrasted with her silver-gray fur. A delicate crown of what appeared to be woven metal and crystal rested between her pointed ears. But it was her eyes that captured his attention. Piercing gold, with vertical pupils that widened slightly as she examined him. "You are called Lucas," she stated, not a question. "Yes," he replied, maintaining eye contact despite the instinctive urge to look away from her predatory gaze. "Do you know why you have been brought here?" "No," Lucas answered honestly, "but I doubt it's for a diplomatic exchange." A sound escaped the Empress, something between a snort and a laugh. "Indeed not. You are here because we have exhausted other options." She circled him slowly, examining every aspect of his appearance. Humans are known to have unusual mental structures, chaotic, disorganized by our standards, yet surprisingly resilient. The older alien, Vex, Lucas would later learn, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if I may explain to the subject—" "I will explain," Ferrara interrupted sharply. She stopped directly in front of Lucas. "Human, I require a mate whose mind can withstand a telepathic bond with mine. 47 candidates have failed. You will be the 48th. Lucas blinked, certain he had misunderstood. "You want me to marry you?" This time, Ferrara's laugh was unmistakable, though utterly without warmth. "Marriage is a primitive concept. What I require is a bonding, a complete telepathic and physiological synchronization that will strengthen the imperial lineage and ensure the continuation of my reign." "And if I refuse?" Lucas asked, though he suspected the answer. "Refusal is not an option," she replied coolly. "But perhaps I should clarify the stakes. If you succeed where others have failed, you will become Empress Consort, with all the privileges that entails. If you fail—" Her gaze flicked briefly to a dark stain on the floor that Lucas had not noticed before. "I see," he said, his military training kicking in as he assessed this unexpected situation. "And what makes you think a human would succeed where your own kind have failed?" Vex answered this time. "Humans possess unique neural pathways and emotional processing centers that differ significantly from our species. While our people value mental discipline and orderly thought, humans exhibit remarkable adaptability under stress. Your interrogation results were impressive. So I survived your torture, and now you want to see if I can survive something worse," Lucas summarized bluntly. "A crude but essentially accurate assessment," the Empress acknowledged. "The bonding ritual will begin tomorrow at first light. You will be prepared and instructed in the basic protocols. I suggest you rest and gather your strength." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Human, the fact that you have been chosen for this honor is not to be interpreted as weakness on my part. It is merely pragmatism." After she departed, Vex approached Lucas with an expression that might have been sympathy. "I recommended you for this, human. I observed your interrogation sessions. You have something the others lacked, a mind that bends but does not break." "That's not exactly comforting," Lucas replied dryly. It was not meant to be, Vex said. But perhaps you should know that this ritual is as dangerous for the Empress as it is for you. Each failure drains her life force. She cannot endure many more unsuccessful attempts. Lucas considered this information carefully. What happens during this bonding? First, a telepathic probe to test compatibility. Then, if you survive that, a physiological synchronization through the ceremonial altar. Finally, if both stages are successful, a complete mental merger. Vex gestured to the attendants, who had materialized silently at the edges of the chamber. These will show you to your quarters and begin your preparation. I suggest you cooperate fully. As Lucas was led away, he found himself in the bizarre position of preparing for an alien marriage ceremony rather than planning an escape. His military training had covered many scenarios, but nothing remotely like this. Still, survival was survival, and if playing along with this ritual bought him time, he would do exactly that. His new quarters were luxurious by any standard. A spacious suite with furnishings that seemed designed for comfort, despite being clearly alien in origin. Food and drink were provided, along with bathing facilities that used some form of sonic cleansing rather than water. Attendants, all silent and efficient, brought garments made of a material that felt like silk but stronger, in deep blue colors that matched the Empress's robes. Throughout the evening, various officials visited to explain aspects of the ceremony. None offered any useful advice on how to survive it. The most informative was Medicane, the royal physician, a smaller female with gray-streaked fur and quick, precise movements. The telepathic probe is the first and most dangerous hurdle, she explained, while examining Lucas with instruments he didn't recognize. Most candidates fail here. Their minds simply collapse under the Empress's psychic presence. And then she kills them, Lucas added flatly. Medicane's ears flattened slightly. The execution is mercy. A mind shattered by failed bonding cannot recover. The subject would live in perpetual agony. How reassuring. I am not here to reassure you, human. I am here to assess your physical condition and optimize your chances of survival. She held up a device that emitted a soft blue light. Your species has surprisingly robust neural architecture. Your brain shows evidence of previous trauma, yet has formed new pathways around the damage. Fascinating. Combat injuries, Lucas explained shortly. He didn't elaborate on the IED explosion that had nearly killed him 5 years ago. The months of rehabilitation, the nightmares that still came sometimes, the memories that felt both distant and razor-sharp. Those experiences may serve you well tomorrow, Medicane said, almost gently. The Empress will attempt to overwhelm your consciousness with her own. Those who have known pain, who have rebuilt themselves from devastation, they sometimes possess greater resilience. When dawn came, or what passed for dawn in the perpetual twilight of the Arhina capital city, Lucas was escorted back to the ritual chamber. He had slept surprisingly well, falling back on the soldier's ability to rest whenever possible before a mission. And this was a mission, he had decided, the objective, survival. The chamber looked different in full illumination. The bioluminescent symbols glowed more intensely, and the black stone surfaces gleamed with an almost liquid quality. More officials and nobles were present, standing in concentric circles around the central altar. Their fur ranged from silver to nearly black, and their robes displayed various insignia that presumably denoted rank or function. Vex met him at the entrance, inspecting his appearance with critical eyes. The first test will begin momentarily. Remember, human, resistance is futile and dangerous. Allow the Empress's probe to enter your mind, but do not surrender your core consciousness. That's contradictory advice, Lucas pointed out. Yes, Vex agreed simply. That is the paradox of successful bonding. A hush fell over the assembly as Empress Ferrara entered from a separate doorway. She wore ceremonial armor, rather than robes now, an intricate arrangement of what looked like silver scales over a bodysuit of the same deep blue material. The crown on her head was larger, more elaborate, with crystals that caught the light and refracted it in hypnotic patterns. She took her position on one side of the altar, and Lucas was directed to stand opposite her. Between them, the basin of luminescent liquid pulsed with increasing intensity. "The telepathic probe will commence," announced an official whose elaborate headdress marked him as some kind of ceremonial master. "May the ancient bonds of Arhina be preserved and strengthened." Ferrara's golden eyes locked with Lucas's. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, without warning, he felt a pressure against his consciousness, like a massive weight pressing down from all sides, seeking entrance to his mind. Lucas had been briefed on resistance to telepathic interrogation during his Special Forces training. Earth had encountered several species with limited mind-reading abilities, and countermeasures had been developed. But this was different. This wasn't a gentle probing for information. It was an overwhelming force, seeking to submerge his entire identity. Instinctively, he drew on his combat training. Instead of fighting directly against the pressure, he visualized himself bending with it, like a reed in a storm. The pressure increased exponentially, becoming almost unbearable. Images from his past flashed before his mind's eye. Childhood memories, combat experiences, moments of both joy and deep pain. Through it all, he maintained a core awareness. I am Lucas. I remain. The pressure suddenly changed character, becoming more focused, more directed. He sensed surprise, not his own, but Ferrara's. She had expected him to crumble by now, as the others had. Instead of intensifying her attack, she shifted tactics. The probe became more subtle, seeking out emotional vulnerabilities, rather than attempting to overwhelm through sheer force. Lucas felt her touching memories of his greatest losses, the death of comrades in battle, failed relationships, moments of profound failure and regret. But rather than hiding these from her, he opened himself to them fully. Yes, I have known loss. Yes, I have failed. Yes, I have regretted. These things are part of me, but they do not define me entirely. The pressure receded slightly, and Lucas sensed something new from the Empress. Curiosity, perhaps even respect. She had not expected this response. Then, abruptly, the probe withdrew completely. Lucas blinked, returning to full awareness of the physical world around him. The chamber was utterly silent. Every alien face was turned toward him in what appeared to be shock. Across the altar, Empress Ferrara regarded him with an unreadable expression. "The first test is complete," announced the ceremonial master, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "The candidate has survived the probe." A murmur ran through the assembled nobles. Vex, standing to one side, allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. "Proceed to the second test," Ferrara commanded, her voice perfectly controlled despite the unprecedented situation. Two attendants approached the altar, carrying small, silver daggers. One presented her blade to the Empress, while the other offered his to Lucas. "The synchronization requires blood offering," explained Vex quietly from beside him. "A small cut on the palm, nothing more." Lucas accepted the dagger. It was surprisingly light, the blade almost translucent. He watched as Ferrara made a precise cut across her palm, releasing a trickle of purple blood that she allowed to drip into the basin of luminescent liquid. The fluid swirled and brightened where her blood entered it. Following her example, Lucas drew the blade across his own palm. The cut stung, but he had experienced far worse. His red blood joined hers in the basin, creating a strange pattern where the two colors met and mingled. "Place your wounded hand in the basin," instructed the ceremonial master. Ferrara placed her cut palm into the glowing liquid without hesitation. Lucas did the same. The fluid was neither warm nor cold, but it tingled against his skin in a way that suggested it was more than simple liquid. Where their blood mixed with it, the glow intensified. "Now, the synchronization begins," intoned the master. "Let flesh recognize flesh, blood know blood, and mind touch mind." At first, Lucas felt only the strange tingling sensation. Then, gradually, a new awareness crept into his consciousness. Not the overwhelming pressure of the probe, but something more intimate. He could sense Ferrara's heartbeat, growing synchronized with his own, her breathing pattern, adjusting to match his rhythm. Most disconcertingly, he began to perceive fleeting impressions of her emotions, a complex mixture of determination, caution, and what might have been hope. From her sudden inhale, he knew she was experiencing the same connection to him. Their eyes met across the altar, and in that moment, something passed between them that transcended the ritual, a mutual recognition that neither had anticipated this level of compatibility. The liquid in the basin began to glow more intensely, pulsating in time with their now synchronized heartbeats. The tingling sensation spread up Lucas's arm, throughout his body, until every cell seemed to vibrate with it. "The physiological synchronization is achieving unprecedented levels," announced Medicane from somewhere beyond the altar, her clinical tone barely concealing excitement. "Neural patterns are harmonizing." Ferrara's expression remained controlled, but Lucas could feel her surprise through their growing connection. She had not expected this, had not prepared for the possibility that a human might not only survive the process, but excel at it. "We will proceed to the final phase," she declared, her voice steady despite the tumult he could sense beneath her composed exterior. The ceremonial master stepped forward. "The complete mental merger will now commence. If successful, the bond will be sealed. If unsuccessful—" He left the consequence unstated. "Remove your hands from the basin and place them on the altar," he instructed. They withdrew their hands simultaneously. Lucas noticed that the cut on his palm had completely healed, leaving only a faint silver line. The glowing liquid clung to their skin momentarily, before sliding back into the basin. They placed their palms flat on the obsidian surface of the altar, directly across from each other. The stone was cool to the touch, but rapidly warmed beneath their hands. "Open your minds fully," the master intoned. "Let barriers fall. Let separation end. Let two become as one." Lucas felt the Empress's consciousness approaching his once more, but differently now, not as an invasive force, but as an entity seeking communion. Still, the power of her mind was overwhelming. Centuries of memories, complex webs of knowledge, and a depth of experience no human could match threatened to submerge his identity completely. This was the critical moment, he realized. The previous candidates had likely surrendered themselves entirely, allowing her consciousness to consume theirs. Or perhaps they had fought desperately to maintain separation, triggering the failure response. Instead, Lucas tried a third approach. Rather than surrendering or resisting, he opened himself while maintaining his core identity, like inviting a powerful ocean wave to flow around and through him without being swept away by it. "Welcome," he projected without words but with clear intent. "I remain myself, but I am open to you." He sensed surprise again, followed by cautious reciprocation. Ferrara's consciousness adjusted, becoming less overwhelming, more accommodating. She allowed him to perceive her as she truly was, not just the cold, imperious Empress, but a being of profound complexity, and he was startled to discover deep loneliness. Through their connection, understanding flowed both ways. He saw the weight of her responsibilities, the crushing pressure of maintaining an ancient dynasty. She perceived his resilience, his adaptability, his capacity for loyalty and sacrifice. The altar beneath their hands began to glow with the same blue luminescence as the basin, the light spreading outward along the symbolic patterns engraved in the floor. The chamber, filled with gasps and murmurs as the intensity of the light increased beyond anything the observers had witnessed in previous rituals. In their shared mental space, something unexpected was happening. Rather than one consciousness dominating the other, a third awareness was emerging, a hybrid consciousness that belonged to both of them, yet was something new and unique. Through it, they could access each other's strengths without sacrificing their individual identities. The light reached blinding intensity, then suddenly stabilized. The pressure in Lucas's mind receded, leaving behind a clear, open connection to Ferrara's consciousness, present, but not overwhelming. "It is done," the ceremonial master announced, his voice thick with emotion. "The bond is formed and stable. The ritual is complete." Lucas blinked, readjusting to normal perception. Across the altar, Ferrara was doing the same, her golden eyes wide with what might have been wonder. "Impossible," someone whispered from the gathered crowd. "A human," came another voice, this one tinged with disgust. But Ferrara silenced them all with a gesture. "The bond is formed," she declared, her voice resonating with new authority. "This human, Lucas, is now Empress Consort of Arhina. His status is equal to my own, his commands second only to mine. Let it be proclaimed throughout the Empire." Through their bond, Lucas sensed that this pronouncement was not merely ceremonial. She meant every word, and more. She was experiencing something entirely new: hope. After 47 failures, after watching her life force drain away with each unsuccessful ritual, she had found a partner whose mind could join with hers without being consumed. As the assembly processed out of the chamber, leaving them briefly alone, Ferrara spoke directly to his mind for the first time outside the ritual. "You succeeded where all others failed," she projected. "How?" Lucas considered carefully before responding. "I didn't try to dominate or submit. I found a middle path." The concept seemed to intrigue her. Through their connection, he sensed her contemplating the implications, not just for them personally, but for her understanding of power itself. "This changes everything," she acknowledged silently. And in that moment, both knew it was true. For better or worse, their unprecedented bond had altered the course of the Arhina Empire forever. The days following the successful bonding ritual were a whirlwind of activity. Lucas was moved to royal apartments adjoining the Empress's own, provided with attendance, and immersed in crash courses on imperial protocol, history, and governance. Through it all, the telepathic bond with Ferrara remained, a constant, subtle connection that allowed them to sense each other's presence and general emotional state, though direct communication required more deliberate focus. Not everyone welcomed the unprecedented development. General Kestre, a powerful military leader with jet-black fur and hard, amber eyes, made his disapproval abundantly clear during the first Imperial Council meeting Lucas attended. "This arrangement undermines the very foundation of Arhina tradition," he growled, not bothering to address Lucas directly. "A human cannot possibly understand our ways, our history, our needs." Yet he understood the bonding ritual better than 47 of our own kind. Ferrara replied coolly. Through their bond, Lucas sensed her irritation, but also her complete confidence. "The results speak for themselves, General." "Results can be misleading, Your Majesty," Kestre persisted. "We have no precedent for this situation. The stability of the Empire is my primary concern," the Empress cut him off. "As it has been for 3 centuries. The bond has strengthened me, restored energies that were waning. That alone should satisfy any loyal subject." The implied question, "Are you loyal, General?" hung in the air between them. Kestre bowed stiffly and withdrew his objection. But Lucas could see the calculation in his eyes. This issue was far from settled. After the council dispersed, Ferrara led Lucas to a private chamber, high in one of the palace's crystalline towers. The room was circular, with windows of some transparent material that offered a panoramic view of the capital city sprawling below. Unlike the ceremonial spaces with their obsidian and bioluminescence, this room was furnished simply, almost austerely. "My private sanctuary," Ferrara explained aloud, though she could have communicated telepathically. "No one enters here without my explicit permission." "It's beautiful," Lucas said honestly, taking in the view. The alien cityscape was both familiar and utterly foreign. Towering structures of crystal and metal, connected by graceful bridges that seemed to float unsupported. The perpetual twilight of this world gave everything a dreamlike quality, with bioluminescent patterns providing both illumination and artistic embellishment. "You've handled yourself well," she observed, moving to stand beside him at the window. "The council was a test." "I gathered that," he replied. "Kestra won't be the only one who objects to my presence. No, the noble houses are conservative by nature. Change threatens their comfortable positions." She turned to face him directly. "But they will adapt, or they will be replaced. The Empire has endured for millennia by evolving when necessary." Through their bond, Lucas sensed that her confidence wasn't entirely genuine. There was concern beneath it, calculations of political risk, assessments of potential threats. "You're worried," he stated simply. Ferrara's ears flattened slightly. A gesture he was learning indicated displeasure or discomfort. "The bond makes deception difficult," she noted. "Yes, I am concerned, not afraid, but realistic about the challenges ahead." "Tell me what I need to know," Lucas said. "If I'm going to help you navigate this, I can't be left in the dark." For a moment, he thought she might refuse. The Empress was accustomed to commanding, not explaining. But then she nodded slowly. "The bonding ritual isn't merely tradition," she began. "It's biological necessity. The ruling lineage of Arhina possesses telepathic abilities far beyond the norm for our species. These abilities allow us to connect with the Empire's nervous system, the network of telepathic amplifiers that maintain order across thousands of worlds." "Like a psychic internet," Lucas suggested. Ferrara tilted her head, accessing his understanding of the term through their bond. "A crude but not inaccurate analogy. Without a successfully bonded Empress, the network weakens, communications falter, control diminishes. The 47 failed rituals have already caused instability in the outer systems. And each failure weakened you personally," Lucas added, recalling what Vex had told him. "Yes, the ritual draws on life force. Repeated failures were draining mine beyond recovery." Her golden eyes met his directly. "You did more than save yourself when you completed the bond, Lucas. You saved me. And potentially, the Empire itself." The frank admission surprised him. Through their connection, he sensed that such vulnerability was rare for her, perhaps unprecedented. "So, Kestra and his allies aren't just offended by my humanity," Lucas reasoned. "They're worried about what our bond means for the Empire's power structure." "Precisely. If our bond proves superior to traditional pairings, if we can strengthen the network in ways previous rulers could not, it threatens millennia of carefully maintained bloodlines and arranged political marriages." A hint of satisfaction colored her thoughts. The noble houses have used the bonding requirement to maintain their privileged positions for generations. A successful bond with an outsider, a human, no less, undermines their entire power base. Lucas considered this information carefully. "So, we're facing potential political instability, possibly even rebellion, from conservative factions. What about external threats? You mentioned instability in the outer systems." Ferrara's expression darkened. "Several subject worlds have grown restless during my period of weakness. There have been incidents, rebellions, quickly suppressed. resources diverted without authorization. The longer the Empire appeared vulnerable, the more such incidents occurred. And the other spacefaring powers. Earth isn't the only human world, and we've encountered other species with interstellar capabilities. The Arhena Empire has maintained supremacy for thousands of years, she replied, a hint of pride coloring her thoughts. But yes, there are others who would not hesitate to exploit any sign of weakness. The Vorn Collective has been particularly aggressive in testing our borders recently. Lucas found himself automatically thinking in military and strategic terms, assessing threats, considering responses, evaluating resources. Through their bond, he could sense Ferrara doing the same. Their thought processes running in parallel, but with different perspectives and experiences informing them. We need to demonstrate strength, he said finally, both internally and externally, but not just through force, through innovation. Show that our bond represents evolution, not weakness. A ripple of surprise and approval came through their connection. You think like an empress, Ferrara observed. I think like a survivor, Lucas corrected. And right now, our survival depends on changing the narrative around this bond. In the weeks that followed, they developed a strategy that played to both their strengths. Ferrara maintained the formal, intimidating presence expected of an Arhena Empress, while Lucas cultivated a different approach, more accessible, more flexible, building alliances with younger nobles and military officers who were less entrenched in tradition. Their complementary approaches yielded results. The most dramatic demonstration came during an attempted assassination 3 months after the bonding. They had been attending a cultural ceremony in the capital's central plaza, a rare public appearance designed to let the populace see their empress and her unusual consort. Security was heavy but unobtrusive, with Commander Rain personally overseeing the arrangements. Lucas sensed the danger, a split second before it manifested, a flash of murderous intent through the telepathic network that Ferrara had been teaching him to access. Without conscious thought, he pulled the Empress aside, just as an energy weapon discharged where she had been standing. The crowd erupted in panic. But what happened next silenced them all, moving in perfect synchronization. Ferrara and Lucas located the assassin through the telepathic network, cornered him using coordinated movements that seemed choreographed, and subdued him with a combination of her telepathic abilities and his combat training. The entire incident lasted less than 30 seconds, but its impact was immense. Recordings spread throughout the Empire, showing the Empress and her human consort acting as a single, devastatingly effective unit. What might have been a tragedy instead became a powerful demonstration of their bond's unique advantages. The would-be assassin was linked to a conservative noble house, allied with General Kestre. Though the general himself was not implicated, the scandal weakened his position considerably. More importantly, it shifted public perception of the unusual bonding. What had been seen as a desperate last resort began to be viewed as a strategic innovation. The timing was almost too perfect, Lucas observed later, as they reviewed security measures in their private chambers. If I were conspiracy-minded, I'd wonder if we hadn't been allowed to detect that assassination attempt. Ferrara's mental signature conveyed amusement. You're learning imperial politics quickly. Yes. Commander Rain may have managed the situation to our advantage. The assassin was real, his intent genuine, but perhaps he was allowed to get closer than he should have been. A calculated risk, Lucas noted without judgment. He had seen similar tactics in Earth's geopolitics. Sometimes the appearance of vulnerability, followed by a demonstration of strength, is more effective than invulnerability, she replied. Through their bond, he sensed not just her strategic thinking, but also her genuine relief that he understood such necessities without moral condemnation. Their relationship had evolved along with their political position. The initial wariness had given way to mutual respect, then to something deeper. They spent hours in private conversation, sharing their vastly different life experiences. Lucas told her of Earth, of its diverse cultures and complicated history, of his own path from troubled youth to disciplined soldier. Ferrara revealed aspects of herself she had never shared with anyone: the loneliness of supreme power, the weight of an empire's expectations, the fear of failure that had haunted her through 47 bonding attempts. Their telepathic connection deepened these exchanges, allowing each to experience the other's memories with an immediacy no verbal description could match. Lucas felt the centuries of Ferrara's existence, the responsibility of decisions affecting billions of lives. She experienced the intensity of his comparatively brief human life, the sharp joys and sorrows, the camaraderie of his military service, the physical and emotional pain of his combat injuries. "Your species feels everything so intensely," she remarked once, after sharing a particularly vivid memory of his rehabilitation after the IED explosion. "It's overwhelming, yet also exhilarating." "We don't have centuries to process our emotions," Lucas pointed out. "Maybe that's why we feel them so strongly." "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "Or perhaps it's simply your nature. It would explain why you succeeded where my own kind failed. You embrace the intensity rather than trying to control it." The physical aspect of their bond had developed as well. The initial biological synchronization had created a connection that transcended normal physical interaction. They could sense each other's physical state: comfort, discomfort, pain, pleasure, with perfect clarity. This led to a form of intimacy unlike anything Lucas had experienced or imagined, a merging of sensation that made traditional physical relationships seem primitive by comparison. Yet, for all their progress, challenges remained. 6 months after the bonding, a crisis erupted in the Larian system, a key industrial hub that had fallen under the influence of separatist elements. Reports indicated that the rebellious faction was receiving covert support from the Vorn Collective. The Imperial Council was divided on how to respond. General Kestra advocated immediate military intervention, a show of overwhelming force to crush the rebellion and send a message to both internal and external enemies. "The Empire has always responded decisively to insurrection," he argued, his amber eyes gleaming with barely contained eagerness for conflict. "Anything less will be perceived as weakness, inviting further challenges." Other counselors favored diplomatic approaches, economic sanctions, or more targeted interventions. The debate grew heated, with factions forming along predictable lines: conservatives supporting Kestre, progressives advocating restraint. Throughout the discussion, Ferrara remained silent, observing. Lucas, seated beside her, could sense her processing the various arguments, weighing options with the perspective of centuries of rule. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "We will handle this situation differently," she announced. "Empress Consort Lucas and I will go to Lyria personally." The council chamber erupted in protests. Such a move was unprecedented, dangerous, against all protocol. The Empress did not place herself in potential danger. She sent representatives, armies if necessary, but remained safely within the Imperial Center. Ferrara silenced them with a gesture. "The unique nature of our bond offers opportunities no previous ruler has had. We will demonstrate its value and the Empire's adaptability by engaging directly with this challenge." Through their connection, Lucas sensed the strategic calculation behind her seemingly reckless decision. This was not impulsiveness, but a carefully considered move on the complex political chessboard of imperial politics. Later, as they prepared for the journey, he questioned her privately. "You're using this crisis to consolidate our position, aren't you?" "Of course," she acknowledged without hesitation. "The Larian situation is serious but manageable. It provides a perfect opportunity to establish new precedents. And if Kestra or others try to take advantage of our absence..." A cold smile touched her looping features. They will find that absence does not equal vulnerability. Vex remains here with a direct telepathic link to me. Commander Rain has been given specific instructions regarding any suspicious activities. Their journey to the Larian system took 3 days aboard the Imperial flagship, a massive vessel that combined military power with ceremonial grandeur. Lucas spent much of the transit studying briefings on Larian culture, economy, and the specific grievances that had sparked the current unrest. The planet itself was a stark contrast to the Imperial capital, a world of massive industrial complexes, mining operations, and manufacturing centers. Its 3 moons had been hollowed out and converted to additional production facilities, connected to the surface by a network of space elevators. Their arrival caused the expected sensation. No Empress had set foot on Lyria in living memory. The Separatist faction, caught off guard by this unprecedented move, scrambled to adjust their strategy. Their leader, Administrator Thal, had been preparing for a military confrontation, not a diplomatic visit from the Empress herself. The initial meeting took place in Lyria's governmental complex, a utilitarian structure that reflected the planet's industrial focus. Administrator Thal was a stocky, dark-furred Arhenan, with the distinctive amber eyes of the northern subspecies. His manner was blunt, his hostility barely concealed beneath a veneer of formal respect. "Your Majesty honors us with your presence," he began stiffly, "though we would have preferred advance notice to prepare appropriate accommodations." "Formality is unnecessary, Administrator," Ferrara replied coolly. "We are here to address substantive issues, not observe protocol." Through their bond, Lucas could sense her reading Thal's mental state, not invading his thoughts, which would violate Imperial law, but assessing his surface emotions and reactions. He was nervous beneath his bravado, uncertain how to handle this situation for which he had no precedent. "Then, let us be direct," Thal said, visibly gathering his courage. "Lyria provides 60% of the Empire's industrial output, but receives less than 20% of the Imperial budget. Our people work themselves to exhaustion, while Central worlds enjoy luxury. These inequities must be addressed." "A reasonable starting point for discussion," Lucas interjected, before Ferrara could respond. They had agreed in advance that he would take a more conciliatory approach, contrasting with her imperial authority. "I'd like to understand more about the specific impacts on Lyrian citizens." Thal blinked, clearly surprised by the human's intervention. "You wish to see conditions firsthand?" "Yes," Lucas confirmed. "Both the Empress and I want to understand the reality on the ground, not just review reports and statistics." The administrator glanced between them, suspicion warring with opportunity in his expression. "That can be arranged. Though I warn you, the conditions in some mining districts are not what you would be accustomed to in the Imperial Palace." "We did not come for comfort," Ferrara stated. "We came for truth." What followed was a carefully orchestrated tour of Lyria's industrial facilities, worker housing, and community centers. Thal clearly intended to showcase the worst conditions, and there was genuine hardship to be seen. Environmental degradation from intensive mining operations had rendered large areas uninhabitable. Worker accommodations were cramped and utilitarian. Medical facilities were understaffed and under-equipped. Throughout the tour, Ferrara maintained her regal composure, asking pointed questions about production quotas, resource allocation, and administrative structures. Lucas, meanwhile, engaged directly with workers, listening to their concerns with genuine interest and sharing his own experiences as a newcomer to the Empire. Through their bond, they shared observations and insights, forming a more complete picture than either could have developed alone. By the tour's end, they had identified key issues, some legitimate grievances, others exaggerated for political effect, and still others deliberately engineered by outside influence. The final stop was a massive ore processing facility, where thousands of workers operated enormous machinery that extracted precious minerals from raw materials. As they entered the main control center, Lucas sensed a subtle shift in Administrator Thal's emotional state. A spike of anticipation tinged with anxiety. "Something's wrong," he projected to Ferrara. "This is staged." "I sense it too," she replied. "Stay alert." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Displays flashed red with warning indicators, and technicians rushed to control panels. "Containment failure in processing chamber 3, someone shouted. "Toxic gas release imminent." "Evacuation protocols," Thal ordered, his voice carrying artificial concern. "Your Majesty, we must get you to safety immediately." Through their bond, Lucas and Ferrara simultaneously recognized the deception. This was no accident but a manufactured crisis, designed either to separate them from each other, to demonstrate the facility's dangerous conditions, or perhaps as cover for something more sinister. Without speaking aloud, they coordinated their response. Ferrara stepped forward, her golden eyes flashing with imperial authority. "There is no containment failure," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The monitoring systems have been compromised with false readings." At the same moment, Lucas moved to the main control panel, his military training guiding him despite the alien technology. "Here," he said, pointing to a specific section of the display. "The backup sensors show normal conditions. Someone has overridden the primary system." The technicians froze, caught between following Thal's orders and responding to this new information. The administrator himself stood rigid, his plan unraveling before his eyes. "Check the secondary systems," Ferrara commanded. "Verify the actual conditions." A senior technician hurried to comply, bypassing the main controls to access a separate monitoring station. After a moment, he looked up, confusion evident in his expression. "The Empress is correct," he reported. "All systems are functioning normally. The alarms are false." All eyes turned to Administrator Thal, whose fur had bristled with tension. Through their bond, Lucas and Ferrara sensed his mental calculations, weighing denial against confession, resistance against surrender. "An unfortunate error," he finally managed, his voice strained. "Perhaps a system malfunction or deliberate sabotage," Ferrara interrupted coldly. "Designed to create panic and disrupt our visit. The question is why?" Before Thal could respond, the facility's communication system activated. Commander Rain's voice emerged from the speakers, tight with controlled urgency. "Your Majesty, we've intercepted transmissions between Larian separatists and a Vorn battle group. They're approaching the system under stealth protocols. Estimated arrival in 3 hours." The revelation hit the control room like a physical blow. Even Thal seemed genuinely shocked. This part, apparently, had not been in his plan. "You invited foreign powers into Imperial space?" Ferrara's voice was deadly quiet as she addressed the administrator. "That is not grievance or protest. That is treason." Thal's composure cracked entirely. They weren't supposed to come yet. The agreement was for military support only after we had established independent governance. They're moving too soon." Through their bond, Lucas sensed Ferrara's calculations shifting rapidly. What had begun as a diplomatic mission was transforming into a military crisis. Yet, beneath her strategic thinking, he detected something else. A cold satisfaction that events were unfolding in a way that would ultimately strengthen their position. This was never just about Larian grievances, he realized. "You suspected Vorn involvement all along." "Suspected? Yes," she acknowledged silently. "But proof is more valuable than suspicion. Now we have both crisis and opportunity." Aloud, she addressed the shocked assembly with imperial authority. "This facility is now under direct imperial control. All personnel will continue normal operations under military supervision. Administrator Thal is relieved of duty, and placed under arrest for treason against the Empire. As Imperial guards moved to take Thal into custody, Ferrara turned to Lucas. The Vorn have overplayed their hand. They expect to find a planet in rebellion, ripe for liberation. Instead, they will encounter a unified Imperial response. What followed was a masterclass in crisis management. Using the Imperial flagship's communications array, Ferrara addressed the entire Larian population, revealing the Vorn plot and appealing directly to their loyalty to the Empire. She acknowledged legitimate grievances and promised reforms, while emphasizing the exploitation they would face under Vorn control. Lucas, meanwhile, worked with Commander Rain to organize the planet's defenses. His Earth military experience provided fresh perspectives on tactics and deployment, complementing the Arhenan officers' technological advantages. By the time the Vorn battle group dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge, they faced not a planet in chaos ready for conquest, but a coordinated Imperial defense. The attempted invasion was repelled with minimal casualties, the Vorn forced into humiliating retreat. In the aftermath, Ferrara made good on her promises. A comprehensive reform package for Lyria was announced, improved conditions for workers, increased local autonomy in non-military matters, and substantial investment in environmental restoration. These concessions came with increased Imperial presence, but the balance was carefully calibrated to address genuine concerns while strengthening Imperial control. Their return to the capital was triumphant. What had begun as a controversial, potentially dangerous diplomatic mission had transformed into a strategic victory on multiple fronts. The Vorn threat had been exposed and defeated. Separatist momentum had been redirected into constructive reform, and most importantly, for their personal position, the unique advantages of their bond had been demonstrated beyond question. Even General Kestre was forced to acknowledge their success, though he did so grudgingly during the council meeting that followed their return. The Empress and her consort handled the Larian situation effectively, he admitted, the words seemingly painful to pronounce. The military response was adequately coordinated. High praise indeed, coming from you, General, Lucas replied with deliberate lightness, earning suppressed smiles from younger council members. Ferrara allowed this moment of levity before steering the discussion to strategic implications. The Vorn incursion represents a significant escalation. They would not have attempted such a bold move unless they perceived systemic weakness in the Empire. A perception you have now corrected, Your Majesty, offered Vex, who had served as her proxy during their absence. For the moment, she agreed. But we must address the root causes. The 47 failed bondings created the appearance of Imperial decline. Our successful bond has begun to reverse that perception, but we must build on this momentum. What followed was a comprehensive restructuring of Imperial governance, reforms that would have been impossible before the Larian crisis, but now appeared as logical responses to demonstrated threats. Military forces were reorganized under commanders loyal to the new regime. The telepathic network received unprecedented investment, with research into how Lucas and Ferrara's unique bond might enhance its capabilities. Most significantly, the bonding ritual itself was reimagined. No longer would it be solely a test of mental submission to the Empress's will. Instead, it would emphasize mutual strength and complementary abilities, a model inspired by their own successful partnership. You're changing the foundations of Imperial succession, Lucas observed privately, as they reviewed the new protocols in their chambers. The conservative houses won't accept this easily. They already lost their most significant battle when our bond succeeded, Ferrara replied. Each subsequent victory makes their position weaker. Besides, they are not as united as they appear. Many see the advantages of adaptation over extinction. Through their bond, he sensed her satisfaction at outmaneuvering her opponents, but also something deeper, genuine belief in the changes they were implementing. What had begun as pragmatic survival had evolved into vision for a transformed empire. "You've come a long way from executing failed bonding candidates," he noted, not unkindly. Her golden eyes met his directly. "As have you, from prisoner to imperial consort." A ripple of amusement colored her thoughts. "We have both been transformed by circumstances." That transformation continued over the years that followed. The Arhena Empire evolved under their joint leadership, becoming more flexible, more adaptive, while maintaining its core strength. The telepathic network expanded and deepened, incorporating innovations derived from their unique bond. Diplomatic relations with other powers, including Earth, were established on more equal terms than previously imaginable. Their personal relationship deepened as well. The initial connection formed during the bonding ritual had grown into something profound. Neither the cold, dominating partnership Ferrara had envisioned, nor the strategic alliance Lucas had initially accepted for survival. Instead, they had created something new, a genuine partnership of equals, each bringing distinct strengths and perspectives. Yet, one fundamental reality could not be changed. Lucas was human. Despite advanced Arhanan medical technology and the life-extending effects of their bond, his lifespan was but a fraction of Ferrara's potential centuries. They had known this from the beginning. Of course, it was an unavoidable fact, acknowledged but not dwelled upon, until, inevitably, it could no longer be ignored. 27 years after their bonding, Lucas's health began to decline. It started subtly: reduced energy, minor memory lapses, physical limitations that accumulated gradually. Medicane and her team of specialists did everything possible, but the fundamental biology of human aging could only be slowed, not stopped. During this period, their bond took on new dimensions. As Lucas's physical strength diminished, Ferrara found herself sharing her vital energy through their connection, not as conscious choice but as natural response to his need. This slowed his decline, but accelerated her own aging, a trade-off she made without hesitation or regret. "You're sacrificing years of your life for me," Lucas observed one evening, as they watched the capital's bioluminescent patterns from their private sanctuary. He was physically aged now, his once strong frame grown thin, his hair white, his movements careful and deliberate. "I'm choosing how to use my life," she corrected. Through their bond, he felt her absolute certainty. "What value would those years have without you?" The depth of emotion behind her words would have been unimaginable to the cold, imperious Empress, who had once viewed him as merely the 48th attempt at preserving her dynasty. That transformation, from isolated ruler to connected partner, was perhaps the most profound change their bond had wrought. In his final year, Lucas worked with Ferrara to ensure the stability of their shared legacy. The reforms they had implemented were now firmly established. The telepathic network functioned at unprecedented efficiency. The empire was stronger, more adaptable, more just than it had been under the old regime. Most importantly, they had established a new understanding of the bonding ritual itself, one that emphasized partnership over dominance, mutual strength over submission. Future emperors and empresses would seek consorts who complemented rather than mirrored them, creating bonds that enhanced rather than subsumed. When the end came, it was peaceful, surrounded by those who had become friends and allies over the decades. Vex, now elderly himself but still sharp-minded. Commander Rain, promoted to Supreme Military Advisor. Medicane and her team of physicians. Lucas slipped away quietly, his consciousness gradually fading. Yet, not entirely. Through their bond, a portion of his essence, his memories, his unique perspective transferred to Ferrara. Not a complete consciousness, not a true continuation of his identity, but something more than mere remembrance. In the years that followed, Ferrara continued to rule the Arhena Empire with wisdom tempered by her experiences. To her council, to imperial officials, to diplomatic envoys, she presented the expected face of imperial authority. But those closest to her sometimes noticed unexpected behaviors, a very human expression, a perspective that seemed out of character, a turn of phrase that echoed Lucas's speech patterns. Through her, aspects of him lived on, influencing imperial policy and direction for centuries to come. The bond they had forged, unprecedented, unexpected, transformative, continued to shape the empire long after both had passed into history. Eventually, Ferrara, too, reached the end of her extended life. As was tradition for rulers of Arhena, her consciousness was ceremonially uploaded into the imperial telepathic network, becoming part of the collective wisdom that guided future generations. And with her consciousness went the echoes of Lucas, the human prisoner who had survived where 47 others had failed, who had transformed an alien Empress, and who had helped reshape an empire. Their story became legend, told and retold across thousands of worlds. The Empress who executed 47 husbands until she met the human who taught her a better way. The tale changed with each telling. Details altered, motivations reinterpreted according to the needs and understanding of each era. But the core truth remained. Two beings from vastly different worlds had formed a connection that transcended their differences. In doing so, they had not only saved themselves, but created something new and enduring. A legacy of partnership that would guide an empire toward a more connected, more compassionate future. In the great telepathic network that spanned the Arhena Empire, echoes of their consciousness continued to influence and guide. A permanent reminder that true strength comes not from domination, but from connection. Not from overwhelming others, but from finding harmony with them. Not from 47 failures, but from a single, unexpected success.